Captain Jake Morrison was drinking his morning coffee when the alarm started screaming. He had been watching the sunrise over New Dakota's endless wheat fields through the observation deck of Defense Station Alpha. The golden light made the planet look peaceful, like something from an old Earth painting. 12 million people lived down there, farming and building families far from the wars and troubles of the inner galaxy. The coffee cup fell from his hand and shattered on the metal floor. Jake ran to the command center where his crew was already at their stations, faces pale with fear. Lieutenant Amy Brooks pointed at the main screen with a shaking finger. "Sir, they just appeared out of nowhere. No hyperspace signature, no warning, they're huge." Jake stared at the display. Massive ships hung in space like dark mountains. He had never seen anything so big. Each vessel was longer than their entire space station. There were dozens of them arranged in perfect formation around New Dakota. Their hulls were black metal covered in strange symbols that seemed to glow with their own light. "Get me Admiral Carter," Jake ordered. His voice was steady, but his heart was pounding. The face of Admiral Lisa Carter appeared on the communications screen. She was aboard the battleship UHS Defiance, humanity's most powerful warship. Behind her, Jake could see her bridge crew running between stations trying to make sense of what they were facing. "Jake, are you seeing this?" Lisa asked. Her usually calm voice had an edge to it. "We count over 2,000 ships across all human systems. They appeared at the same time, everywhere." Before Jake could answer, every screen in the command center flickered. A new image replaced Admiral Carter's face. It was something that made Jake's blood turn cold. The creature was tall and thin, covered in shiny black plates like an insect. Its head was triangular with 4 glowing red eyes arranged in a diamond pattern. When it spoke, the words came through a mechanical translator that made its voice sound hollow and emotionless. "Humans of the Outer Rim worlds," the alien said. "You will listen and you will obey. I am Ambassador Vex Thule of the Zeridian Empire. Your species has been selected for incorporation into the Empire." Jake felt his crew gathering behind him. Amy Brooks was recording everything while the others watched in stunned silence. This was first contact, but not the kind humanity had hoped for. "You have 72 of your hours to comply with these terms," the alien continued. "All military vessels will power down their weapons and surrender to Imperial forces. All planetary governments will transfer authority to appointed Imperial governors. All humans will accept their new status as subjects of the Empire." The ambassador paused, letting the words sink in. "Compliance will result in the preservation of your species as productive members of Imperial society. Your worlds will continue to function under proper guidance. Your people will serve the Empire's greater purpose." Jake wanted to speak, to demand answers, but the broadcast was one way. The alien wasn't interested in conversation. "Non-compliance will result in total extinction. Your species will be eliminated, and your worlds will be given to more worthy subjects. This is not a negotiation. This is your reality." The screen flickered again, showing a view of space near New Dakota's second moon. Jake watched in horror as one of the massive alien ships fired a single beam of pure energy. The moon, a chunk of rock and ice that had orbited the planet for millions of years, simply vanished. One moment it was there. The next, it was expanding gas and dust. "Your primitive weapons cannot harm us," Ambassador Vex Thule said, as the demonstration ended. "Your ships are toys compared to Imperial technology. Your defenses are meaningless. You will kneel or you will burn." The transmission ended, leaving Jake's command center in dead silence. Outside the windows, the alien fleet hung motionless in space like sleeping giants. The destroyed moon was already spreading into a thin cloud of debris. Lieutenant Amy Brooks was the first to speak. "Sir, I'm getting emergency transmissions from all the colonies. Everyone got the same message." Jake nodded slowly. His mind was racing, trying to process what had just happened. Humanity had spread across 43 worlds over the past century. They had built farms and cities, factories, and universities. Millions of families lived peaceful lives thinking they were safe in the outer rim of the galaxy. Now aliens with unimaginable power were demanding total surrender. Get me President Phillips on Earth, Jake ordered. Emergency priority, full encryption. While Amy worked to establish the connection, Jake stared out at the alien ships. They were beautiful in their own terrible way, like works of art made for war. He tried to count them but gave up after 50. Each one could probably destroy his entire defense station without effort. The communication screen lit up again, showing the face of President Dan Phillips. The leader of all human colonies looked older than Jake remembered. The stress of the past hour had aged him years. Jake, thank God you're still alive, President Phillips said. We're getting reports from every system. The aliens hit us everywhere, at once. What are our options, sir? Jake asked, though he suspected he already knew the answer. President Phillips was quiet for a long moment. Behind him, Jake could see other government officials moving frantically through what looked like an underground bunker. Earth's leaders had gone into hiding. General Walker is mobilizing every ship we have, the president finally said. 300 vessels against over 2,000. The math isn't good, Jake. Jake nodded. He had fought in the border wars against pirates and raiders. He knew what impossible odds looked like. This was worse than impossible. There's something else, President Phillips continued, his voice dropping to a whisper. Dr. Helen Ross wants to speak with all colony commanders. Project Scorched Earth is being activated. Jake felt a chill run down his spine. Every senior military officer knew about Scorched Earth, though few knew the details. It was humanity's final option, the plan they hoped would never be needed. Sir, the evacuation ships, Jake said. If we're considering Scorched Earth, we need to start moving civilians now. Already in progress, President Phillips replied. Every available transport is being loaded. We're telling people it's a precautionary measure, temporary relocation to safer systems. The truth was much darker, and Jake knew it. If Scorched Earth was activated, there would be no safe systems. There would be no humanity left to relocate. Outside his window, the alien ships continued their silent watch. 72 hours to surrender everything humanity had built. 72 hours to choose between slavery and extinction. Jake looked at his crew. Good people who had families down on New Dakota. Amy Brooks had a husband and 2 young children in the farming district. Chief Engineer Pete Martinez had just become a grandfather last month. They were all looking at him, waiting for orders that could mean the difference between life and death. But Jake was beginning to understand that life and death might not be the only choices they faced. President Dan Phillips stared at the classified files scattered across his desk in the underground bunker beneath Washington. The papers were marked with red stamps that read, Project Scorched Earth, Eyes Only. He had hoped he would never need to open these files. Now they might be humanity's only real choice. Dr. Helen Ross sat across from him, her face pale but determined. She was the head of the Prometheus Research Initiative, humanity's most secret scientific program. For 3 years she had been preparing for this exact moment. Mr. President, you need to understand what we're talking about, Helen said quietly. This isn't just about destroying our worlds. It's about making sure nobody else can profit from our deaths. General Pete Walker stood by the wall, studying tactical displays that showed humanity's military forces. 300 ships against over 2,000 alien vessels. Every calculation showed the same result. Complete defeat within hours of any real battle. How long do we have? President Phillips asked. 48 hours remaining, General Walker replied. The aliens gave us 72 hours total. We've used the first day to start evacuations and move our fleets into position. President Phillips picked up one of the classified reports. It described fusion reactors being modified into planet-killing weapons, orbital defense platforms converted into massive bombs, industrial facilities rigged to create chain reactions that would tear apart entire worlds. How many people can we save? He asked. Dr. Ross checked her tablet. Current estimates show 73 million people can be evacuated. If all ships work at maximum capacity, that's less than 10% of our total population. The numbers hit President Phillips like a physical blow. 800 million humans lived across the 43 colonies. Even if they saved every person they could, over 700 million would die. On New Dakota, Captain Jake Morrison watched the evacuation ships lifting off every few minutes. The massive cargo vessels were packed with families, their belongings limited to what they could carry. Children pressed their faces against windows, watching their homeworld shrink away. Jake's communication system buzzed with a priority message from Admiral Lisa Carter. Her face appeared on his screen, looking tired but focused. "Jake, I need your honest assessment," she said. "Can your defense platforms hold for 6 hours if the aliens attack?" Jake looked out at the alien ships hanging in space like dark clouds. They hadn't moved since their arrival, just waiting for humanity's answer to their ultimatum. "Maybe 3 hours if we're lucky," Jake admitted. "Their demonstration with the moon showed us what their weapons can do. We're outgunned by a factor of 1,000, Lisa nodded grimly. "That's what I expected. Your real job isn't to win, Jake. It's to make it look like we're fighting as hard as we can. The aliens need to believe this is our best effort." Jake understood what she wasn't saying directly. The real plan was something else entirely. Something that required the aliens to think humanity was fighting a conventional war. On New Oregon, Captain Amy Brooks coordinated her own evacuation efforts while engineering teams worked deep underground. The planet's fusion reactors provided power for 12 million people across 4 continents. Now those same reactors were being modified for a very different purpose. Chief Engineer Mike Rodriguez emerged from the reactor facility, his face covered in sweat and radiation detection badges glowing yellow. "Ma'am, the modifications are 70% complete. We need another 18 hours to finish the job." Amy checked her watch. They had 36 hours before the alien deadline expired. 18 hours to finish the modifications, then 18 hours to get every possible person off the planet. "How many more evacuation runs can we manage?" she asked her operations officer. 14 more ships, ma'am. That's another 40,000 people. Still leaves us 8 million short." Amy closed her eyes for a moment. 8 million people who would die because there simply weren't enough ships to save them all. The mathematics of extinction were brutal and simple. Her communication system chimed with an incoming message from Dr. Helen Ross. The scientist's face appeared on screen, broadcasting simultaneously to all colony commanders. "This is Dr. Ross with final technical briefings for Scorched Earth implementation," she began. "Each world has been equipped with the necessary modifications over the past 3 years. The systems are designed to create controlled fusion cascades that will completely sterilize each planet." Jake Morrison, Amy Brooks, and 39 other colony commanders listened as Dr. Ross explained the technical details. The weapons were hidden inside normal infrastructure. Fusion reactors, orbital platforms, even some of the larger cities had been secretly prepared. "The timing must be precise," Dr. Ross continued. "Each world will activate in sequence, 60 seconds apart. This will create a visible display across multiple star systems simultaneously. The message must be clear to anyone watching." Admiral Lisa Carter's voice joined the conference. "The fleet engagement will begin 30 minutes before the first activation. We need to make the aliens think they're winning a normal battle. They have to believe they've defeated our military forces before the planets start exploding." President Phillips appeared on screen from his bunker on Earth. His face showed the weight of the decision he was about to make official. "I'm authorizing Project Scorched Earth," he said quietly. "God help us all, but I'm giving the order. 41 worlds will be destroyed in 36 hours. Earth and New Texas will remain as coordination centers until the final evacuations are complete." The conference went silent as the reality settled in. 41 human worlds, each with millions of inhabitants, would be turned into miniature stars. The survivors would watch their entire civilization burn rather than bow to alien masters. Jake Morrison looked out at New Dakota's wheat fields golden in the afternoon sun. Children were playing in the parks of the cities below while their parents, packed for what they thought was temporary evacuation, most of them would never see another sunrise. "Sir," Lieutenant Amy Brooks said quietly. "The people down there, they don't know, do they?" Jake shook his head. "They think this is a military evacuation. They think they're coming back when the danger passes." The truth was too horrible to tell them. In 36 hours, New Dakota would become a ball of plasma expanding at near light speed. The wheat fields, the cities, the memories of 12 Million people would be scattered atoms floating in space. But those atoms would carry a message that would echo across the galaxy, a message that some things were worth more than life itself. A message that would haunt the Zeridian Empire for generations to come. Jake watched another evacuation ship climb toward the stars, carrying a few hundred more souls to safety. It wasn't nearly enough, but it was all they could do. Humanity was about to show the galaxy what the price of freedom truly meant. The alien deadline expired at exactly 0800 Galactic Standard Time. Admiral Lisa Carter stood on the bridge of the UHS Defiance, watching as the Zeridian fleet began moving into attack formation. The massive alien ships glided through space like deadly whales, their weapons charging with energy that made the stars dim by comparison. "All ships, prepare for engagement," Lisa commanded into her communications system. Her voice was steady, but everyone on the bridge knew they were about to die. The plan required them to fight as hard as they could for exactly 30 minutes, long enough to make their resistance look real, but not so long that it interfered with what came next. Captain Jake Morrison watched from Defense Station Alpha as the battle began. Human ships launched missiles and energy beams at the alien vessels, creating brilliant flashes of light against the darkness of space. For a few moments it looked like humanity might have a chance. Then the aliens fired back. The first human ship to die was the cruiser UHS Liberty. It simply vanished in a ball of white fire when an alien beam hit it directly. No explosion, no debris field, just gone. Jake watched 2,300 crew members disappear in less than a second. More human ships died quickly after that. The aliens moved through space like they were fighting children, casually destroying anything that opposed them. Jake's defense platforms fired everything they had, but their weapons barely scratched the alien hulls. "Sir, incoming transmission from President Phillips," Lieutenant Amy Brooks reported. Her voice was tight with fear as she watched human ships burning around them. President Phillips appeared on the communication screen. Behind him, Jake could see the emergency bunker on Earth filled with government officials and military commanders. Everyone was watching the same hopeless battle. "Citizens of humanity," President Phillips began, opening a channel that broadcast across every human settlement. "The Zeridian Empire demanded that we kneel before their power. They demanded that we surrender our freedom, our dignity, and our future." Another human ship exploded on Jake's tactical display. The destroyer UHS Courage broke apart under alien fire, its crew of 800 lost in the vacuum of space. Jake gripped his chair arms until his knuckles turned white. "Today we give the Empire our answer," President Phillips continued. "We choose death before dishonor. We choose extinction before slavery." The president's image switched to a direct transmission aimed at the alien fleet. Fleet Admiral Xerix appeared on screen, his 4 red eyes glowing with satisfaction as he watched human ships burning. The insectoid alien was enjoying the slaughter. "Admiral Xerix of the Zeridian Empire," President Phillips said calmly. "You demanded that humanity kneel. Here is our answer." Jake checked his chronometer. 28 minutes since the battle began. 2 minutes until the first activation. Around New Dakota, the alien ships had destroyed half of his defense platforms. Soon they would start bombing the planet itself. On New Virginia, the countdown reached 0. The planet's industrial centers had been secretly modified over 3 years. Fusion reactors designed to power cities were now connected in a careful chain reaction. When Chief Engineer Sam Roberts pressed the activation button, he had 30 seconds to say goodbye to his world. The explosion started small, just a bright flash in the planet's northern hemisphere. Then it spread like fire across the continents. The ocean began to boil as the planet's crust cracked and superheated gas rushed toward space. Within 90 seconds, New Virginia became a miniature star. The Zeridian ships in orbit had no time to escape. The energy wave vaporized them along with everything else in the system. Admiral Xerix watched his tactical display in shock as an entire star system showed readings that made no sense. 60 seconds later, New Oregon followed the same pattern. Captain Amy Brooks stood at her command post as the planet began to shake beneath her feet. The fusion cascade was spreading through the continental reactors, turning solid rock into expanding plasma. She had stayed behind to coordinate the final evacuation ships, knowing she would never leave herself. For every human child who will never have to bow to tyrants, she whispered into her communication system. Her words were her final message to the galaxy. New Oregon became the second human world to choose fire over chains. The pattern continued across human space. New Montana, New Alaska, New Carolina. Each world followed in perfect 60-second intervals. Jake Morrison watched the tactical displays as star system after star system showed the same impossible readings. Fleet Admiral Xerx's confident expression changed to confusion, then horror, as he realized what humanity was doing. This wasn't military defeat. This wasn't even resistance. This was species-wide suicide on a scale the galaxy had never seen. "Stop this madness," Admiral Xerx transmitted to the human fleet. "Surrender now and we will spare your remaining worlds." Admiral Lisa Carter, her ship badly damaged but still fighting, replied with humanity's final diplomatic message. "We leave, nothing for tyrants to claim." The UHS Defiance exploded under concentrated alien fire 3 seconds after she finished speaking. Lisa Carter died with her ship, taking 2,000 crew members with her. But her message continued to broadcast across the galaxy on emergency frequencies. Jake Morrison's turn came when New Dakota reached its position in the sequence. He watched through the station windows as the planet's surface began to glow. The wheat fields that had fed 12 million people were becoming superheated gas. The cities where children had played yesterday were turning into expanding balls of plasma. "This is Captain Jake Morrison of Defense Station Alpha," he said into his communication system. "Let the galaxy know that some prices are too high to pay. Let them know that humans chose to burn rather than bow." The energy wave from New Dakota's destruction swept through space at the speed of light. Jake had just enough time to see the alien ships around him start to vaporize before the wave reached his station. Across the galaxy, anyone with long-range sensors could see the pattern. 41 star systems, each becoming a brief but brilliant beacon visible from hundreds of light years away. The energy signatures were unmistakably artificial, unmistakably coordinated. Humanity had turned their worlds into a message written in fire across the darkness of space. A message that said freedom was worth more than life itself. On subjugated worlds throughout the Zeridian Empire, slave species looked up at the sky and saw something they had forgotten existed. They saw hope burning like stars in the night. 3 days after humanity burned their worlds, the galaxy was in shock. News of the mass suicide spread through every star system at the speed of light. Species that had never heard of humans suddenly knew their story. The Zeridian Empire tried to block the transmissions, but it was too late. The message was already everywhere. On the mining world of Kepler-7, a Vrex worker named Keth Moore stopped his drilling machine and stared at the communication display. The translation was rough, but he understood the basic facts. An entire species had chosen death rather than serve the Empire. 41 worlds had burned themselves to ash rather than kneel. Kethmore had been a slave for 30 years. He had watched his children grow up in the mines, never seeing sunlight, never knowing freedom. The Empire told his people that resistance was impossible, that they should be grateful for their lives as servants. But if humans could choose death over slavery, what did that say about the Vrex choice to live in chains? For the first time in decades, Kethmore put down his tools and walked away from his workstation. Other miners saw him and stopped their own machines. Within an hour, Sector 7 had completely shut down. The same scene played out across dozens of worlds. The Empire's slave species had always been told they were lucky to be alive, that serving the Zeridians was better than extinction. Now they had seen proof that some beings thought differently. Fleet Admiral Xerx stood in his command center aboard the Imperial flagship, staring at reports from across the Empire. Work slowdowns on 17 worlds, equipment sabotage in 12 systems, open revolts starting on 3 separate planets. How is this possible? He demanded of his intelligence officers. The humans are dead. Their worlds are gone. How are they still causing problems? Commander Vex Cool, his second in command, pulled up tactical displays showing the spreading unrest. Sir, the human sacrifice has become a symbol. The subject species are calling it the Great Burning. They say it proves that freedom is possible. Admiral Xerx's 4 eyes glowed red with anger. Freedom is not possible. We control this galaxy. We have controlled it for 800 years. But the reports kept coming in. On the agricultural world of Theron Prime, the enslaved Kalari had stopped harvesting crops. On the industrial planet, Nexus Station, the hearth workers were breaking machinery instead of repairing it. Everywhere the Empire had built its power on forced labor, that labor was grinding to a halt. In deep space, Captain Steve Martinez commanded one of humanity's few surviving warships. The refugee fleet under his protection carried 2 million human survivors, all that remained of their species. They should have been running as far from Imperial space as possible. Instead, they were moving toward the rebellion. "Sir, we're receiving a transmission from the Vrex Resistance on Kepler 7th, his communications officer reported. They're asking for our help. Steve looked at the message on his screen. It was written in broken Standard Galactic, clearly translated from the Vrex language, but the meaning was clear enough. "Human friends," the message read, "you showed us the price of freedom. Now we ask you to help us pay it, not with death but with life. Help us fight." Steve thought about the irony. Humanity had tried to end their story with the Great Burning. Instead, they had started something much larger. Their choice to die for freedom had inspired others to live for it. "Send a reply," Steve ordered. "Tell them we're coming." Meanwhile, on Earth's burned remains, something unexpected was happening. The planet had been turned to plasma 3 days ago, but the debris field contained something the Empire hadn't expected. Hidden communication satellites protected by special shielding had survived the destruction. Dr. Helen Ross had planned for this moment. From her bunker on the moon, she activated the final phase of humanity's message to the galaxy. The satellites began broadcasting continuously, telling the complete story of why humanity chose extinction over slavery. The broadcasts included personal messages from the people who died, families saying goodbye, children asking why they had to burn, soldiers explaining that some things were worth more than life. But most importantly, the broadcasts included technical data, detailed information about Imperial technology, fleet movements, and weaknesses, everything humanity had learned during their brief contact with the Zeridians. On Theron Prime, Kalari rebels received the technical data and learned how to disable Imperial communication systems. On Nexus Station, hearth workers used human intelligence to sabotage the right Imperial facilities. The dead humans were still fighting, teaching the living how to resist. The Empire's response was swift and brutal. Admiral Xerx ordered massive retaliation against any world showing signs of rebellion. Entire cities were destroyed as examples. Millions of slaves were executed to maintain order. But for every act of Imperial brutality, the resistance grew stronger. The humans had shown that death was preferable to slavery. Now other species were learning that fighting back was preferable to helpless submission. President Dan Phillips, governing humanity's survivors from a hidden base in the asteroid belt, received daily reports about the spreading rebellion. Each morning brought news of new species joining the resistance, new worlds throwing off Imperial control. "They're calling it the Fire," his intelligence chief reported. "The rebellion is spreading faster than the Empire can contain it. 17 systems in open revolt, 43 more showing serious unrest." Phillips nodded slowly. He was one of the few surviving human leaders carrying the burden of his species' near extinction. But he was beginning to understand that humanity's sacrifice had not been in vain. "The humans died to show the galaxy that freedom was possible," he said quietly. "Now the galaxy is learning that freedom is inevitable." General Pete Walker, coordinating with alien resistance groups, agreed. "Sir, we're getting requests for military advisors from 6 different species. They want to learn how to fight the Empire effectively." Phillips smiled grimly. Humanity had planned to end their story with fire. Instead, they had lit a flame that was spreading across the galaxy, consuming the very empire that demanded their submission. The Zeridian Empire, built on 8 centuries of unopposed rule, faced its first real challenge since its founding. All because one species had refused to kneel and chosen to burn instead. In the ruins of 41 star systems, expanding clouds of gas and debris continued to glow with residual energy. The light could be seen from hundreds of light years away, a constant reminder of humanity's choice. The galaxy would never forget the species that preferred extinction to slavery, and the Empire would never recover from the fire humanity had lit in their final moments. 2 years after the Great Burning, the galaxy was a very different place. The Zeridian Empire, which had ruled without challenge for 8 centuries, was fighting for its survival. What started as work slowdowns and minor sabotage had grown into full-scale rebellion across half the galaxy. Captain Linda Foster stood on the bridge of the New Hope, watching her combined fleet prepare for another strike against Imperial forces. Her ships carried the symbol of scorched earth, a burned world surrounded by stars. Half her fleet was made up of human survivors, but the other half came from 20 different alien species. Target confirmed. Her tactical officer reported. Imperial supply depot at Sigma 7. 12 ships defending, mostly older cruisers. Linda nodded. The depot supplied Imperial forces fighting rebels in the Outer Rim. Destroying it would help 6 different resistance movements. More importantly, it would send another message that the Empire was not invincible. All ships, begin. Attack, she ordered. The battle was brief but fierce. Imperial ships fought desperately, but they were outnumbered and outgunned. The rebels had learned to work together, combining human tactics with alien technology. The Vreks were excellent engineers. The Kalari had natural pilot skills, and the Horth could repair anything. Working together, they had become something the Empire had never faced before. A unified resistance with a common cause. Meanwhile, on the industrial world of Tygon Prime, the largest slave rebellion in galactic history was entering its 2nd week. Keth Moore, the Vrex miner who had first put down his tools, now led 3 million workers in open revolt against their Imperial masters. He stood before a crowd of rebels in the planet's main factory complex, holding a small crystal device in his clawed hands. The crystal contained complete records of humanity's great burning, including personal messages from the humans who died. The humans had a choice, Kethmore told the crowd through a translator. Serve the Empire or die. They chose death because they believed freedom was worth more than life. The crowd listened in silence. These beings had lived as slaves for generations. They had forgotten what freedom even meant. But the human example had reminded them. We have the same choice today, Keithmore continued. We can live as slaves or die as free beings. But the humans showed us a third option. We can live as free beings and make the Empire die instead. The crowd roared its approval. Across the planet, Imperial forces were trapped in their fortified compounds, unable to venture out without facing immediate attack. The slaves who had once cowered before their masters now hunted Imperial soldiers through the streets. In his command center on the Imperial flagship, Fleet Admiral Xerix stared at tactical displays that showed rebel victories across dozens of systems. His once mighty fleet was scattered across the galaxy, fighting desperate defensive actions. Every week brought news of another world lost to rebellion. Sir, we're receiving a transmission from the rebel fleet, his communications officer reported. Nervously, Xerix almost refused to accept it, but he needed to know what he was fighting. The face that appeared on his screen was human, a middle-aged woman with scars across her cheek and fire in her eyes. Admiral Xerix, Captain Linda Foster said calmly. I'm offering you the same choice your empire offered humanity 2 years ago. Surrender now and accept your new reality. Xerix's 4 eyes glowed with rage. You dare threaten the Empire? Your species is extinct. Your worlds are ash. Linda smiled coldly. Our worlds are ash, but our message burns brighter than any star. Look around you, Admiral. How many systems are still under your control? How many species still fear your threats? The truth was painful but undeniable. The Empire now held direct control over less than 40% of its former territory. Rebellions were active in another 30%. The remaining systems were isolated, cut off from Imperial support. The humans chose to burn rather than kneel, Linda continued. Now the galaxy has learned that burning empires is preferable to serving them. You can surrender and face justice, or you can join the tyrants who came before you in extinction, Xerix cut the transmission, but her words echoed in his mind. For 800 years, the Empire had maintained order through fear and overwhelming force. Now both were failing them. In the deep space, refugee ship carrying humanity's government, in exile, President Dan Phillips received daily reports about the rebellion's progress. Each morning brought better news. The Empire was retreating on all fronts, their forces stretched impossibly thin. "Sir, we're getting reports from the core systems," his intelligence chief announced. "Even on the Imperial homeworld, there are signs of unrest. The Xeridians themselves are questioning their government's policies." Phillips nodded slowly. He had aged greatly in the past 2 years, carrying the weight of his species near extinction, but he had lived to see something he never expected. Humanity's sacrifice had not only inspired rebellion, it had made victory possible. "General Walker, what's our fleet status?" Phillips asked. "Combined rebel forces now outnumber Imperial ships by almost 3-1, Walker reported. "We have functional governments on 67 liberated worlds. The war isn't over, but we're winning." Phillips walked to the observation deck and looked out at the stars. Somewhere in that darkness were the expanding gas clouds that had once been human worlds. 41 civilizations reduced to glowing nebulae, visible across half the galaxy. But those nebulae had become monuments to something greater than any single world. They were proof that some principles were worth dying for, and that death in service of those principles could change everything. On the former slave world of Kepler-7, now the headquarters of the Galactic Liberation Front, representatives from 43 species worked together to plan the final assault on Imperial territory. They called themselves the Alliance of the Burned, honoring the humans who had shown them the price and value of freedom. The war was far from over. The Empire still controlled hundreds of worlds and thousands of ships. But the momentum had shifted permanently. The galaxy had learned that tyrants could be defeated, that empires could fall, and that freedom was worth any sacrifice. Admiral Xerix received the final surrender demand 3 months later. By then, his fleet was trapped in the Imperial home system, surrounded by rebel forces that had once been his empire's slaves. The message came from President Phillips himself, speaking for all free species in the galaxy. "Admiral, your empire demanded that humanity kneel. We answered with fire. Now the galaxy answers with freedom. You can surrender with dignity, or you can burn with your empire. Those are your only choices." Xerix looked out at the rebel fleet, surrounding his world. Ships from dozens of species united by humanity's example, ready to finish what the Great Burning had started. For the first time in 8 centuries, the Xeridian Empire prepared to kneel.